Well, good morning. How are you today? Good? Got a little bit of a great? All right. You guys made it through the rain. I said this at 9 o'clock. I'll say it to you guys as well. We were in Honduras, and I'll just say the effort that people go through to get to church. If you ever complain about you can't make it to church, you have no idea, okay? So the places they climb, so you guys are here. The rain did stop, so you do have a little bit of excuse. But anyway, I think it's funny. People go, I can't come to church. It's raining. But anyway, glad you guys are here today. Let's pray, and then let's get into the life of Paul, Acts chapter 18. God, we love you. We thank you so much for today. Lord, we just thank you for the opportunity we have to hear your word. And I just pray, God, that you will speak clearly through me. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. So we are in the life of Paul. We are back in Acts chapter 18. Acts chapter 18. Before we get started, let me ask you this. What, in your opinion, what do you think the church should look like? What is the church? I grew up, I was born in the church, not literally. That would be weird. But my dad was a pastor. We were there. If the doors were open, we were there. Anybody with me? I mean, every time the doors were open, we were in church. It was Sunday school, Sunday morning church, Sunday night church, Wednesday night church, or youth group. I mean, we had something going on all the time. Sometimes we had these things called revivals that lasted all week long, Sunday through Friday night, and we were there. Severy time the doors were open, we were at church. But my mom taught me. She had these little hand gestures. Some of you may have seen these before. The one I'm going to use, you probably have seen, but it's this little hand gesture to describe the church. Anybody remember this one? Right? Here's the church, and here's the steeple. I'm old, I know that. Open the door, and where are the people, right? And then she got creative, and she'd be like this. Here's the church, here's the steeple. Open the door and see all the people. And it's like she had all these other gestures. You know, when you're in junior high, you're like, okay, Mom, that's enough. I don't need the gestures anymore. But I was raised to believe that the church equals people, right? But it seems like in America and really around the world, we have begun to define the church as a building. What's it look like? We're going to the church. I'll meet you at the church, right? So this is the church. Or we describe it as a certain day, time, and place, right? So Sunday morning, 11 o'clock, we're going to church, right? So even though I was taught that church was the people, over time, it became easy to morph into these ideas that the church was something else, that it was this organization that had people on staff that we met together. Now, hear me. I need to say this because I say this a lot, and so I need you to hear what I'm about to say. I'm not saying we need to undo this, okay? I'm not saying we shouldn't have a building. I'm not saying we shouldn't meet on Sundays or whenever we decide to meet. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do those things. But do you see how we've kind of morphed into this idea that the church is something God never intended for it to be? And so I'm asking this question, what do you think church is? Because I really want to ask this question, which is, are we here to build a church or are we here to establish a faith community? Now, your first answer to that probably is like, those don't sound different, right? Those sound the same. If you understand what the church is, they aren't different. But I want to ask that question because what I see in Paul, and I see this in all of his ministry, but it just really jumped out to me here, is that Paul was going into these cities and these towns and these villages and these communities, and he was building up faith community more than he was trying to build a church the way we think of it. Have you ever found yourself through this series, have you ever found yourself reading stuff about Paul, but your mind starts picturing what we do here? You start picturing kind of this Western view of church. When you say, well, Paul went in and established a church. Okay, well, they must have had a building and a bunch of people and they met. We start thinking that way. And so I want us to look at Paul and what he did and try to understand what he did so we can emulate that, because I think we should spend our time doing one way more than we do the other. So when we left you, we have a map here where Paul was traveling. When we left last week, Paul was in Corinth. And which is down middle left, he's in Corinth. He's traveled across Asia Minor. During the first journey, he actually established faith communities in that region. He went across the Aegean Sea. He went to Philippi, Thessalonica, Berea, and he established faith communities, and that's the Macedonian part of Greece. And then you come on down to Achaia, which is where Athens is. He was there, and then in Corinth, and that's where we left him. And what he was doing there was he was a tent maker. We talked about this last week. I read this week that actually the word could mean tent maker. It also could mean a worker of leather. So from Tarsus all the way over there on the right where Paul was from, there was a lot of opportunity to make things out of leather. So he may have made tents, but he also was someone who just worked with leather. But we'll call him a tent maker. And so he's a tent maker so he can make money, but then he's also going to the synagogue and trying to share Jesus with people so he can convince Jews and Greeks to come to faith in Jesus. And that's where we left him, and I want us to pay attention to what he's doing because I think we need to emulate it. Verse 5 of Acts chapter 18. When Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, okay, you know me, I'm going to stop. All right, when he arrived from Macedonia, so you had them, he left them in Berea. If you go back to chapter 17, Paul left Silas and Timothy in Berea, which is part of Macedonia. And he told them, come to me as quickly as you can. Then Paul escaped from Berea, went to Athens. They didn't go to Athens. They went later from there and met up with him in Corinth. Don't know how long of a time it was, but what we do know is if you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 8 and following, Paul will talk about how these brothers brought this gift or this offering from the Macedonian churches. So here's what I think was going on. These guys were drumming up support for what Paul was doing. So not only was he bivocational, he was also donation-based missionary. And so these guys brought this offering to him, and you'll see how that changed what he was doing because he was working as a tent maker, and I think he continued to do that while he shared the gospel bivocationally. Like I said, we all should be. But he also continued to do the work once these guys showed up with the money. So look what it says. When Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself to preaching the word and testified to the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah. So now he devotes himself to preaching the word. He devotes himself to the word. Actually, in the Greek, it only says devoted to the word. Okay? Devoted means it's something he's experienced at. It's what he spent his time doing. He now is focused on this. The word logos is all that's there. Preaching's not there. Well, what's that mean? Well, the word for logos became, in the Christian world, actually began to be known as preaching the word. Okay, so he devoted himself not just to studying the word, but actually proclaiming the word. And Luke tells us as he's telling them that Jesus is the Messiah. So he's committed to the gospel message here, okay? Verse 6. When they, the Jews, resisted and blasphemed Paul, he shook out his clothes and he told them, your blood is on your own hands. I am innocent. I am clean is what that word means. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles. It's like, you guys don't want the message? I'm going to the Gentiles, okay? That's what he decided. So he devoted himself to these things, to preaching the word, letting people know who the gospel is. That's what this word means. So was he building a church? Was he focused on building a church? I mean, I don't know about you, but my first thought is when I think of building a church, what I think, well, you got to get a building or at least a place to rent, right? And then you got to have at least one pastor. I mean, that can't possibly be done by someone who's not paid, right? Or someone who's a lay person. They got to at least be bivocational, right? And so we got to get all this together. We got to raise some money so we can build a church. Is that what Paul was doing? No. I think Paul was devoting himself to, as he went, right? Wherever God sent him, to the places he sent him, to the people God sent him to, he's sharing the gospel message and trying to convert people, trying to get people to put their faith in Jesus, trying to get Jews and Greeks who were following God to now make Jesus the Lord of their life. I've been telling you this for almost a year, and I will not back down from this. Our mission is to make disciples as we go. Our mission is to let people know who Jesus is no matter where he sent us, whether it's in college, whether it's at work. Maybe you got to start at home with your family. I just had this conversation with Charlotte driving me back from Oklahoma City. I said, you know what? Who is my community? It starts with her. We spend so much time together, just the two of us, no one else around. That's my community. How much am I giving her life? How much is she giving me life when it comes to the gospel message? We don't need to be convinced to believe in Jesus. We're already there. But how much are we growing together in our community? And so it's important. See, people like to build churches. You look around. What's it look like? We're in Oklahoma. Drive up and down the street. How many churches are you going to see, right? I mean, they're everywhere. And the problem is we take them and we divide them and say, well, this one doesn't belong to this one, so it's not one church. We see them all as individual churches. And so what do? We we get a building and we want other people to be impressed with what we're doing, with our building, with our attendance, with how much money we have, with how much, and granted, this is all good, with stuff, what impact are we having in the community, right? But we want people to take notice. I remember when we came here and we merged with UCC, I remember thinking, and I used to work here, so this isn't I'm not downplaying anything, but it's like this location, man, it's like we can't even be seen by anybody. Again, I was falling into the trap of thinking that if you build it, they will come. You know, if somehow we just build this church. And I pastored the church that's our South Oklahoma City campus. It was Antioch Christian Church at the time. And I pastored there. And I felt like every day I was failing because I was comparing myself to the church down the street. And I don't know about you, if you guys understand this being in the pastor role, but we got a pretty big church in Oklahoma that does things really, really well. And if you're going to sit here and try to build a church and compare yourself to them, you're going to feel like a failure, right? So that's what it looks like to build a church. I don't think that's what Paul was doing. He wasn't trying to, we got to have this, this beacon of light. No, the beacon of light is me. It's you. It's the people and not this building or this organization called a church. He was just trying to win people over. And so what happened? Like normal, people resisted. They blasphemed against him, and he shook the dust off his feet. He shook his clothes. What's that mean? I mean, isn't that weird? I mean, we're Westerners, so we don't understand that. There's a couple scriptures. What's it mean to shake out your clothes or to shake the dust off? Nehemiah 5:13, God is asking his people to do something, and they promised they'd do it. And here's what Nehemiah said. I also shook the folds of my robe, and I said, may God likewise shake from his house and property everyone who doesn't keep this promise. May he be shaken out and have nothing, shaking the dust out of the fold of his robe. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus is sending these disciples out, 72, 2 by 2, and he's sending them out, and he says these words in verse 11 to 14. He says, when you enter any town or village, find out who is worthy and stay there until you leave. And greet a household when you enter it. And if the household is worthy, let your peace be on it. But if it is unworthy, let your peace return to you. I give you my blessing of peace. Nope, you don't like me. I'm taking it back. I mean, that's what he basically says. If anyone does not welcome you or listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet when you leave that house or town. It was in Eastern culture, in Mid-Eastern culture, it was a sign of disassociation. It was a sign of transfer of responsibility. It was a sign of judgment. It was a sign of moving on. Okay, you don't want what I've got? I'm moving on. Now, we're not starting a new ministry here, okay? This is not the ministry of shaking the dust off our feet, okay? We're not going to, well, someone doesn't like us, and so we're going to disassociate with them. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that Paul, when he reached this point and he was being opposed by them, he said, okay, I'm done with you. I'm moving on to the Gentiles. Funny thing, I'm about to show it to you. He didn't move on. It's so funny, okay? So he wasn't building a church. What was he doing? Let's look at what he's doing. He was establishing, I believe, a faith community. What's that look like? How's it different from an organization called a church? Verse 7. So he left there, and he went to the house of a man named Titius Justus, a worshiper of God, whose house was next door to the synagogue. You see it? He didn't give up on the Jews. Verse 8, again, Crispus, the leader of the synagogue, believed in the Lord along with his whole household. So he didn't give up on them. He moved from Aquila and Priscilla's house. He was living with them. And Luke doesn't tell us why, but now he moves over to this other place. We'll call him TJ. Living with TJ. And he gets over there and he's living with him right next to the synagogue. And he leads Crispus, the leader of the synagogue, to faith in Jesus. Pretty cool, huh? He didn't give up, even though he said, I'm moving to the Gentiles. He didn't give up on the Jews. Then it says an incredible statement. Many of the Corinthians, when they heard, believed and were baptized. You remember last week when I told you that to call someone a Corinthian was actually an insult? Because Corinthian, if you were called a Corinthian, it meant that you were immoral. It meant that you were depraved. It meant that you were a horrible person. You Corinthian, and that's an insult. This place was so bad, and yet many of them came to faith in Jesus and were baptized. They joined, hear me, a community of believers, a faith community. Verse 9, the Lord said to Paul in a night vision. Was this a dream? Was he awake? Was he asleep? The word doesn't really tell us. But the Lord said to him, don't be afraid, but keep on speaking. Don't be silent. Keep preaching the word. For I am with you, and no one will lay a hand on you to hurt you. He says, I will have my presence with you, and I will have my protection with you. Because I have many people in this city. Probably even some people who hadn't put their faith in Jesus, but he'd already claimed them as his own. There's some Calvinistic doctrine for you, right? Some of you get that, some of you don't. Verse 11. He stayed there a year and a half. Do you see it? He stayed there 18 months teaching the word of God among them. How many times have we seen Paul enter a town and be driven out? He stays a few days, he stays a few weeks, he stays maybe a couple months. Paul is told by God, by Jesus in a vision, don't leave. This place needs me. There are many people who are so immoral and so depraved because, listen to me, sometimes it's easier to reach people who are far from God than it is to reach people who think they got everything together. And so he's telling them, I want you to stay there. I want you to stay there. And I want you to make my name great. And so he stays there for 18 months. So what is a faith community? I'm saying building a church versus a faith community. Well, first of all, we need to know, what does it mean we're going to establish a faith community? What's a faith community? First of all, a faith community is a group of believers in Jesus. We're going to say in Jesus. A faith community can be in anything, but we're going to say a Christian faith community is a group of believers who have put their faith in Jesus, who say they belong to Jesus, and who say they belong to one another. That's what baptism does. Baptism helps us identify ourselves as being with these people. So that's what a group of believers is. We're a group of believers who happen to meet here at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, right? But we're a group of believers. This is a faith community. What else is it? It's a group that spends time together to encourage one another, to learn how to walk in the ways of God, to learn how to be unified together. Does that have to happen in this room on Sunday morning at 9 and 11? No. Is it good that it does? Yes. But it can happen somewhere else. It can happen in your home with your family. It can happen at work, right? Where you're in community, the people that God sent you to. And you're sharing faith with them. And let me ask this. I asked this up because there's high school kids sitting in Oklahoma City right here in front of me. And I said, is it easier to go to school when there's other people who believe and you can lock arms with them than it is to do it by yourself? Is it easier to go to work when there's at least one person who has faith in Jesus so you can at least encourage one another and stick together? Well, no, I got to wait till I get to church on Sunday to actually have community, biblical community. No. Some of you get together in home groups, and it's awesome that you're spending time together. And we talked last week about making the community you're already in sacred and biblical. That's fine. But this is a group of people that gathers together. It's also a group of people that never stop spreading the Word of God. Never stop spreading the gospel message. We are committed to multiplication. Guys, I will say it till I'm blue in the face, and you'll replace me in I don't know how long. I'm not making an announcement. You will replace me very, very soon. And I tell you, this person will do it, and I will continue to just share the gospel message because that's what we're supposed to do. And you're probably tired of hearing me saying it, and you're going to keep hearing me saying it. I'll say it to you out there in the lobby, or I'll say it to you from the stage. We have a mission to continue to share the gospel with the people we encounter. I was so encouraged this morning when we were in our prayer time, and one of the band members sharing how they've been sharing the gospel with someone at work. And that's it. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And that's what a community of faith is. And it's also a group of people who enjoys the presence and the protection of Jesus. That doesn't have to happen in this room. It doesn't happen. I don't have time to go there. I won't say anymore. So how's establishing a faith community different than building a church? Let me give you some things. You see, building a church focuses on buildings, money, organization, and attendance and processes. Building a church focuses on those things. Are those things bad? No. But if we're focused on those things, We're focused on, we got to make sure the building is perfect and it's in the right location and it's big enough. We need it to be big enough, don't get me wrong. But we're focused on those things, and we're focused on the money, and we're focused on the attendance. And can I let you in on a secret? I've said this to you before, I'll say it again. I'm secure enough to say this. This has happened in America because guys in my position have done it to have job security. And I'm not saying we don't need organizations and we don't need staff members and you can fire us all. That's not what I'm saying. You may one day want to do that. I don't know. But all I'm saying is this. We don't want to focus on those things. What does a faith community do? Establishing a faith community focuses on people and on relationships and on spiritual journey. I could venture to say that every one of you in this room, if you've been here for any period of time at all, you are connected to this place because of a relationship, right? With somebody. And I hope it's with people beyond the staff. I hope the staff has helped you feel that, but I hope it's beyond the staff. And this is your church not because it's the best in town and not because it's got the best building and the biggest building and the most money and blah, 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 but it's because there's a connection, because people matter. Do you know while Paul was in Corinth, he wrote letters back to the church in Thessalonica, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Actually, in a few weeks, we're going to stop and we're going to have a Sunday on one and a Sunday on the other letter, just to kind of, as we move forward, we're going to start seeing Paul write letters. And so we're going to stop and kind of get an overview of each of those letters, and we'll stop the narrative. And why did he do that? He should be focused on Corinth, right? He's establishing a faith community here. Why? Because those people matter to him. We had a really hard week this week, Charlotte and I did. Some of you already know about this, but we used to be the youth ministers here, and we had 2 kids from our youth group. They're not kids anymore, 45 and 47, who lost their lives last weekend. 2. We found out on the same day. It was tough. Why was it tough? It's been 30 years. Why was that tough? Because we love those people. Because we really care for those people. And we got phone calls from other people in our youth group. People even that are here today, we got phone calls from some of you and talking. It was really awesome, to tie back to those relationships and go, man, these people matter to us. These people matter to us. So a church focuses on people and relationships. A faith community does. A church is an organization, has specific designated times, places, and locations and days, right? We already talked about this. A faith community can gather anywhere, anytime, different settings, different days for community growth, disciple making. You can do it anytime, anywhere. We don't need to stop doing this, but if this is the sum total of your faith, you're missing out on a huge chunk of what God has for your faith. A church as an organization primarily provides worship gatherings and programs and events for people to be entertained. But a faith community, hear this, equips and empowers people to be the church. We're going to talk way more about this next week. But a faith community equips and empowers people to be the church in the places where God has sent you, to the people God has sent you to. Whether it's the kids in your classroom, the kids on your team, the students you go to school with, the family members you have, the people you work with. Our job is to equip and empower you to do the work. We'll talk more about that next week. Building a church tends to produce consumers who are inward focused. But establishing a faith community produces contributors who are outward focused. Building a church can sometimes happen in a relatively short period of time. Establishing a faith community takes a commitment of patience and time. Let me ask this question. Would you rather have ribs cooked in the microwave or the crock pot? We get that, right? Let me show you a picture of a couple of chickens. Which one do you want? The one on the left was cooked at 900 degrees for 1 hour. Yeah, you ladies that cook, you're like, yeah, that was stupid, right? The one on the right was cooked at 325 for 3 hours. Which one do you want to eat? Right? Which one do you want to eat? See, I think it's a problem of chasing wins versus developing players in the sports world. You get that? Right now, it's said that Brent Venables is on the hot seat, right? Why? Because this is my opinion, and it's not popular for some of you if you like to win, right? I like to win too. But I believe he spent 3 years trying to develop men and trying to develop players. You can still win with that, right? But you got to have patience because it takes time. And there's a lot of people out there that want him gone because they're chasing wins. Well, wins are great. And I believe if you stay the course, you can have the wins as well. But it may take more time to get there. I was a 6th grade basketball coach for 1 year. You can laugh, it's funny. 1 year. So we had a kid on our team, his name was Chris Johnson. 6th grade, Chickasha, Oklahoma. His name was Chris Johnson. Chris went on to be a defensive tackle, or defensive end, I can't remember, at Kansas State University. Actually went on to play in the NFL. But in 6th grade, I was his basketball coach, and he was about my height at 6th grade, about 6'2" at my, and all the other kids were down here, okay? We could have won every game. You know what the plan is? Throw the ball to Chris, right? Chris, go set yourself up on the block, throw the ball to Chris, we win every game, right? Because all the other teams, their players were down here too. That's not what I chose to do. I looked at my team, I said, guys, my job is to teach you how to play the game of basketball. My job is to teach you how to love the game and to play it the right way. And yes, I told him this. We could win every game because all we got to do is throw it into Chris. Nobody can stop him. But I want you, when you get to junior high and high school and even beyond that, I want you to know how to play this game, because if you're looking around and you don't have a Chris Johnson, what are you going to do? You got to know how to play the game. I had parents of those little short kids mad at me and griping me out because we didn't win enough games. We should have won every game. Yeah, we should have. Your kid needs to be better. No, I didn't say that, but he's not listening to me. He just wants to throw it to Chris. 1 year. I was a basketball coach for 1 year because I refuse to take the shortcut. Now, we got to hurry. Let's go. You can expect resistance, by the way, when you try to change things up like I'm talking about. Look at what it says. Verse 12. While Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews made a united attack against Paul and brought him to the tribunal. So this is a governor of the province. They bring him to this judge. It looks a lot like, by the way, Jesus in front of Pilate. Verse 13. This man, they said, is persuading people to worship God in ways contrary to the law. In other words, he's doing things differently than we're used to. As Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, if it were a matter of wrongdoing or of a serious crime, it would be reasonable for me to put up with you Jews. Gallio didn't care about Paul. He wasn't speaking for Paul. He was speaking against the Jews. He didn't want to put up with them anymore. But if these are questions about words, names, and your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be a judge of such things. So he drove them from the tribunal, and they all seized Sosthenes, the leader of the synagogue, who had become a believer. Actually, people believe he helped Paul write 1 Corinthians, the letter to the Corinthians when he wrote back to them. And they beat him in front of the tribunal, but none of these things mattered to Gallio. They came together, and they began to attack him. Because why? Because he was doing things differently. If we try to do that, guess what? The world's going to look at us and go, what's wrong with Summit Church? I mean, they used to be big. Why aren't they big? Or who knows what God's going to do? God can still make this place. I believe he will and can pack this place out. But if we don't focus on that and people aren't going around saying, well, it's just different or it's not the same or whatever, it doesn't matter, because I don't care what the religious world thinks of us. I don't care what people are saying about Summit Church or whatever community of faith we choose to be a part of. I care what the non-Christian world thinks because I want them to come to faith in Jesus, right? But I'm not concerned about those things. What I'm concerned about is people, individuals who need to know Jesus, and that's going to take some time, and we've got to invest our time and our effort into that, establishing a faith community, not trying to build a church that everyone's proud of. And you're going to get beat up because of that. There'll be people in here that might beat us up for it. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Why? I'm telling you, and I'm not the one that's going to be leading us, but I'm going to be part of leading us, and this is my heart for what we should do. As the band comes back up, let me tell you why. Let me end by telling you why I think people would rather build a church than establish a faith community. First of all, because it's comfortable. It's comfortable. Because change is hard. I mean, some of you complain that we don't have water bottles anymore. I mean, if that's you, I'm not going to say shame on you. I understand. There's a big difference, right? But, yeah. If this was you, I apologize. I'm sorry for the person who told me this because he's probably going to get mad that I told you. But somebody complained that they only had 4 donut holes in the cup instead of 5. Here's $5. Go get some donuts, right? No, I'm kidding. That's not nice. But I've been through the worship wars, changing from hymns to choruses. And the songs we sing today, from no music, piano and organ to bands. King James Version to NIV to, Nathan, what version are you preaching from? I've been through all of that, right? Change is hard. So we would rather build a church because it's comfortable. It's what we know. It's what we understand. This is uncomfortable, right? We'd also rather build a church because it feels good when numbers increase and people take notice. I'll be honest. I'm speaking for me. When someone says, man, Summit Church got it going on, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good, right? It feels good. Easter Sunday, when you have more people. When the college kids come back, it feels great, right? Oh, this is awesome. How are we gauging whether we're successful or not? Because Paul was gauging it when he told them, I'm going to the Gentiles. I'm shaking the clothes off, right? Paul was gauging his success based on if people were coming to faith in Jesus, not based on all the things the world was saying makes a good church. I also think people would rather be entertained than to be on mission. I think people would spend their time and focus on building a church because we'd rather be entertained than be on mission. Because it's a lot easier to go watch the game than it is to put in the effort and the work it takes to play the game. So we'd much rather just come and let someone entertain us as opposed to being on mission. But I think ultimately the biggest reason why people would rather build a church than establish a faith community is because we don't have the patience to invest the time it's going to take. Because superficial relationships are a lot easier to navigate than the deep ones I'm talking about. I got people in my family that need to know Jesus better. Do I just give up? Do I turn the oven up to 900 degrees and if they don't do it, I don't care, I'm just going to burn them? No pun intended. No. I got that patience. And we don't have that kind of patience sometimes. It's just easier to have these superficial, surface level relationships instead of diving down deep and saying, I'm going to do what I can. I had they're the only people I share this with, but I had heard of a college student that came here. And they talked about how much Summit has changed over the last year. And they got another year. They were coming back. And they were like, I just think I'm going to go somewhere else because it's not the same. And one of our staff members looked at him and said, so you're going to when you came here, these older people poured into you. And now you're going to go somewhere else and not pour into the younger ones that are coming behind you. It's hard. We got to do it. We were in Honduras, like I said a few weeks ago. There's a lady there we work with. Her name's Crystal. I've told you about Crystal before. Crystal is she's an islander. She's a very large islander. She used to be a prostitute. She used to be a drug addict. She went through a rehab ministry there. She was the first lady to graduate from the rehab ministry. As of last count, and I haven't gotten an update, but as of last count, she has 19 foster children from Honduras living in her house. And every day, somewhere between 65 and 70 Honduran kids, from babies all the way to high school, come to her house to get 2 meals. Now, if you meet Crystal, you're going to go, she's not very nice. Does she even know Jesus? I mean, she's gruff. I mean, she'll tell little 3 and 4-year-olds, sit down in your chair. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to sit down in my chair now, Man, she loves Jesus, though. I found something out this time. John and Charlotte and I found something out this time when we went. So we went to her community. It's called Mud Hole. It's exactly why it's called Mud Hole. They're very descriptive in their names, right? And we walked around handing out groceries to families and these moms that she's working with these kids. And I began to see the relationship she had with all of these people in this community. And I began to see them come up to her, and she's sharing with them. And we found out that she's sharing Jesus with them. She's sharing life with them. She taught them how to save money, which is not a thing in Honduras, just so you know, hand to mouth, right? And she's incredible what she's done. And it hit me. That's her church. She gets it. The people that God has sent her to and the places where God has sent her, where she literally can't go that far, that's her community. And so she's doing church with those people. She still goes to church. She goes to the church we go to. She sings very loud and out of key. And it's painful at first and very joyful as you think about what's going on. She gets it. That's her church. And so as we stand and worship and respond to what I've said today, we have prayer team members up here. I'll be up here. Come pray with me if you want to. If you want to ask God to challenge you this year to do more. But here in a short period of time, we're going to have a leader to come in. And I'm just telling you right now, I want us to be a place that focuses less on building a church and more on establishing faith communities, so that we can go on mission, making disciples as we go. You ask the Lord how He wants you to respond. Let's stand. Let's worship Him.